My challenge to you is to stop creating a narrative of who you need to be and accept who you are in this moment. Who you are in this moment is enough. Who you are in this moment has always been enough. Accept that person, meet yourself where you are. And then from there, see what you can create from that person rather than the person who's always lacking. I'm Michael A. Blunt, Executive Mindset Coach, and welcome to Wealthy Minded, the podcast for elite men who are looking for success beyond the money. Welcome to the Wealthy Minded podcast. And in this podcast, we are going to discuss limiting beliefs and how to push past those limiting beliefs in order to create a lifestyle where you can have it all. And the reason why I created this podcast, Wealthy Minded, is because I wanted people to look beyond financial success. What is beyond income? And when I looked beyond income, I realized that there was a gap between where people felt they needed to be and where people were fulfilled. Most people focus on financial success and they really feel like that's all there is to life. But when you focus on providing value for other people other than yourself and attracting peace, time, freedom, and connection as a result of that, then you can start to understand the benefits of becoming an ultra wealthy person. Wealthy minded is reframing your mindset when it comes to wealth. To be wealthy minded is to invest in all areas of wealth in your life and to receive back the life and the lifestyle that you deserve. Not just financial success or for you to win in one area of life, just to sacrifice in every other, but for you to have it all. And the reason why I created the podcast is because I was there. I was just like a lot of you who are listening today, financially successful or successful in my own right, but still feeling like something was missing, something was off, like there was a gap in my emotional connection to life. I felt disconnected from my body and I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why I didn't feel fulfilled. I didn't feel like I should feel unhappy. I felt like I should be grateful and I felt guilty because of that. Financial success had only taken me so far and I needed to understand what was beyond that. When I moved beyond financial success, that's when I started creating the life that I had always deserved. I started cultivating a peace of mind. I started really exploring connection, which eventually landed me in a place of freedom. So today I'm going to share my journey of how I was financially wealthy, but I was spiritually, mentally, and emotionally poor, and how the limiting beliefs that I developed over my life had kept me from feeling like I was deserving of more, and how I overcame those limiting beliefs to create a wealthy mind. It's taking me 42 years to get to the point where I am now, and I'm still on this journey. This is something that I'm still in the trenches with, and I'm still learning every single day, mastery, discipline, moving into my next level. And it's something that I worked a lifetime on getting to. Before, I just thought that something was wrong with me. I just thought that I needed to work harder, I needed to grind harder, and I eventually would feel better. I just thought that the more money I made, the better I would feel. I never knew that the more money that I was making actually made me feel more anxious. And when I felt more anxious, that's when the real problems started to come to life. That's when I started to really understand that I'm having a panic attack. That's when I started to have stress hives all over my body. That's when I started to form TMJ, where I could barely bite down on food because of all the stress and anxiety that I was dealing with in my life. And that eventually manifested itself into depression. I was still operating, I was still functioning, I was still high performing, but there was a piece of me that was slowly deteriorating and losing myself. And that gap of feeling unfulfilled kept getting wider and wider and deeper and deeper. And it eventually led me to feeling, why am I on this earth? Not from a purpose perspective, but from the perspective of people won't miss me if I wasn't here, which eventually I realized were the initial thoughts of suicide. When I finally got to that point of suicide, that's when I knew something needed to change. And when I started to make the changes in my life, that's how I got from that point A to the point B of where I am now. In this episode, I am going to share that journey with you. of moving from point A, depression, feeling overworked, undervalued, feeling unfulfilled, getting to the place of what now? What do I do next with all this financial success? To actually making that change and getting to the second part of my life, the second act of finding fulfillment and really stepping into a place of accepting myself and having it all. What does that look like? What is that gap? And once you get there, what's next from there? So the part from A to B, and me being actually in B, of having enough, being enough, and having it all, it's not where I've always been. My story actually started off in poverty. And it actually started off with a single parent mother who had me when she was a freshman in college, but who was pregnant with me as a senior in high school. So I essentially went to college with my mother. I not only stayed in the dorms with my mom as a freshman, but we also went to class together. So you can imagine this 19-year-old girl with a 2-year-old toddler in the back of the class trying to pacify me and trying to feed me while also trying to understand biochemical engineering. We started off in welfare and Section 8 housing because she didn't have the resources and she didn't have a job in order to really facilitate a lifestyle for me nor herself. But the interesting thing about that period is I never felt poor. I never felt like food stamps were actually food stamps. I felt like it was imaginary money for my mother and I. I never felt like government assistance housing was a government assistance housing. I felt like the government found us special. I never felt that going to school and not having a babysitter was because my mother couldn't afford a babysitter. I felt like she just wanted to spend more time with me. So all of these different scenarios, and you would think the environment that I grew up in would cause me to really feel less than, or really feel poor, or really feel that there was a lack of resources, but I felt the opposite. I actually felt rich. My mother was able to create a bubble for me that really allowed me to thrive. My mother was very resourceful. She was very resourceful, not only in her money, but also in education. She was not only resourceful in education, but she was resourceful in how we lived our lifestyle. That resourcefulness passed on to me. I always felt prosperous and I always felt abundant. And I didn't know that I was doing that consciously, but unconsciously, that's exactly what happened. I was reprogramming my mind to fixate on the environment and the reality that I wanted to see rather than the reality that I was in. I'll give you an example of how my Christmases used to go with Santa Claus. So there would be a number of things that I wanted: bikes, video games, different toys. And my mother never told me no. She would just tell me that Santa only had so much room to bring my presents. Which ones did I want to prioritize? So that's what I did. I started prioritizing the toys that I wanted. And then she said, well, now you need to prioritize based on money. And when you prioritize based on money, that's when you could decide which ones are going to fit within that list that you have. So that's when I first learned how to budget. And I used to clip coupons and I used to go to different stores and I used to write different lists and I used to look at all the discounts that were happening at different times of the year so that I could actually have what I wanted. Now, again, my mom could have said, we don't have the money. Santa can't bring you this. We can't do that. But she never put that in my vocabulary. She allowed me to become resourceful and she allowed me to access the infinite resources around me in order for me to get what I want when I needed to get it. That is actually the true definition of manifestation. How do I change my thought and how do I access the resources around me in order to create what I want into the material things around me? How do I convert the images that I have in my head into something physical? How do I become resourceful enough in order to access the resources that are around me in order for me to get what I want in life? I'm really grateful for having the opportunity to learn under her and be around that. I was able to shift from a lens of lack to possibility. And that might be something that you're going through right now. It might be a situation where you don't have the finances to afford something. It might be a situation where you don't really have access to the things that you want. My challenge to you would be to, regardless of the physical conditions that you see in your reality, to continue to connect to the wealth, to the vision, and to the image of what you ultimately want to see in your reality. And that will eventually manifest. So even though I had that feeling of resourcefulness and I had that unconscious skill of manifestation, I still never felt like I was enough. I still always felt that I wasn't worthy. I still always felt that I was one step behind everyone else. And that is what actually fueled my success. It fueled my success into high school when I played sports and I did really well in sports and football and basketball when I ran track. It fueled my success in getting into colleges and winning scholarships in order to study computer science. It fueled my success later when I was looking for internships at some of the jobs after college. It fueled my success in graduating with honors, and it fueled my success in landing a corporate job at one of the banks and becoming an engineer. All throughout my childhood, I never felt that I was enough. So I was always trying to prove myself of how I could be better, how I could do more, how I could be more noticed, and how I can become enough for the people who were around me. Unbeknownst to me at the time, that limiting belief came from my father. And that was the same little voice that I had when I was a kid that was telling me that I needed to become better at football. That was the same little voice that was telling me as a kid that I needed to score more points in basketball. Because maybe if I did that, my dad would actually come to one of my games. Maybe if I excelled more in school, my dad would actually come and give me a congratulations and tell me that he loved me. I continue my successful climb into corporate America, graduating from honors in college, eventually going on to get my business degree from one of the top business schools in the States. After that, that's when I really started my corporate career. And I thought that is where I was going to end my legacy. I was going to continue to climb the corporate ladder. I was going to become more successful, eventually become a CEO. And that's where I was going to retire and sell off into the sunset. So that's what I did. I came in with the same bubbly mindset of being imaginative and connecting to success and connecting to prosperity, regardless of the physical conditions around me. But I also used the fuel of not feeling like I was enough in order to get promoted and move from one position to another. Or at least that's what I thought that I was going to do. When I got into corporate America, all of that changed. My bubble actually got busted. Within 2 years of me being in my first job in corporate America, I was fired. Now, mind you, this wasn't just any job. I was an assistant brand manager at one of the top Fortune 500 companies in the world. I was only 25 years old and I was making six figures. This is the goal that I always had. I wanted to make six figures. I had bought a house at the age of 22. I had my own car. I had investments. I was traveling the world. I was dating an amazing girl at the time. And I felt like things were always going right for me. And when I ran into this roadblock, the first thing I can think in my mind was, that's right, they found me. I knew that I wasn't enough. I felt this imposter syndrome. I felt that I was being discovered. And that's when everything started to unravel. So then I go to my next job. Again, with the mindset that I can create anything that I want in my bubble, that if I just imagine it, if I could just connect to prosperity and success, regardless of the physical conditions around me, if I just work really hard and if I'm just doing really well, that I will be ultimately successful and accepted. It happens again. This time, 6 months into my corporate job, I actually get fired. And that little voice inside my head starts percolating again. You're financially successful, but you're still a failure. You're not enough. There's something wrong with you. So I continue to jump from job to job. And with every jump, ironically, because I was still keeping that vision of success, I would get a promotion. So I would make more money, I would get a promotion, but then I would find the same exact failure a year or two into that corporate job. I would normally run into a manager who didn't like me, or I would normally get into a situation with work where it was no longer okay for me to be there. And that eventually hit its head in my last job. And this was actually my dream job. I was a brand manager at another Fortune 500 company. And this time I was selling alcohol. And this was my dream job for so many different reasons. And I really wanted it to work. About 2 years into the job, I started feeling some of those same symptoms, feeling undervalued, overworked, feeling burnt out. And I still kept coming back to the fact that I wasn't enough. That eventually started manifesting as anxiety. That anxiety moved into depression. And that depression started to talk to me in a way where I felt that if I wasn't on this earth, people would never notice and no one would ever care. Well, one day when I came to work, that whole notion of becoming more successful, I started having a panic attack. And I not only had a panic attack, but I had a panic attack in the middle of a huge meeting that I was having with my director and all of his staff. This whole notion of not feeling like I was enough had taken a life in its own and had become so much of a burden that finally it started to show up physically. Finally, it started to show up in my job performance. Finally, it started to show up in my success. I couldn't manifest my way out of it anymore. I had to actually deal with the limiting beliefs that were holding me back from the next level of my growth and my full human potential. So imagine going into an office. I'm sitting on the right side of the office. The door is on the left. You got 8 people around this round table. I start getting a panic attack about 30 minutes into the meeting. I have to move through all of the people who were in the office in order to go outside. And once I'm outside, I still don't know what to do. Should I call an ambulance? And no one's coming to help me because half of the people don't even want me there. Or at least I feel like half of the people don't want me there because that whole time I'm still feeling like I'm not enough. And then I eventually get into a taxi. I take myself to NYC Medical and I meet with my doctor. And I ask my doctor, after putting IVs in me, after getting half naked behind the curtain and sitting in the waiting room for about an hour, what's wrong with me? And immediately my doctor responds back, nothing is wrong with you. You have anxiety. And I said, well, there's so many physical conditions that are happening in my body. Again, I'm getting stress hives. I have TMJ. I can barely sleep. And I feel like the walls are closing in around me. What is wrong with me? And he said, nothing is wrong with me. You just have anxiety. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, because of the emotional trauma that you're going through in your life right now, they're showing up as physical ailments in your body. When the doctor told me this, that sparked all of these memories that I had of the emotions that I suppressed over my life that had eventually hospitalized me. This is what led to my spiritual awakening. And this is what led to the second act of my life, of really accepting myself for where I was, really meeting myself for where I am rather than where I wanted to be, and really becoming the person and the man who I am today. So while I was in the hospital, I really started contemplating how I wanted this to move forward. If I wanted to continue to move forward, striving for financial success, or if I wanted to move forward, continuing from a place of fulfillment, connection, and freedom. I knew that this was an opportunity for me to fully live. And that's what I chose. Immediately after I left the hospital, the next day, I quit. I went to my manager and she asked me, what is it that you want? What is it that you want to do? I just want to be happy. I just want to be fulfilled, and this isn't working for me anymore. So I quit. That was the beginning of me moving in to my new identity. This led me to create my own business after that. This led me to really finding my purpose in the things that I wanted to do in life. This is what led me to actually start examining the relationship that I had with my father and start confronting some of the traumas and the demons and some of the triggers that were growing inside of me that I had never really dealt with. I started thinking about my relationship with my father and why he never prioritized me, why he never showed me the love that I was expecting. And I realized that he was operating from his highest level of consciousness. My dad was an alcoholic, and he numbed himself from the time he was 15 to the time that he was 63 years old. Thank God he's still alive, and thank God he's still in my life. And he gave me the opportunity to really change the story and use this as a stepping stone to share with you. I realized that nothing that he did was personal. all he was doing was operating the best way that he knew how to do. He didn't not love me. He just didn't know how to love himself. And in not knowing how to love himself, he didn't know how to show that love to me. You can only operate and give what you have given to yourself. And understanding that he wasn't even able to provide those things in his own life, how is he going to be able to give that to me? This allowed me to feel compassionate for him. And I started meeting my father as a friend rather than a dad. When I was able to meet my father as a friend, someone who really cared about me, but someone who couldn't love me in the way that I wanted him to love me, that was the moment that I was able to fully accept him for who he was. And when I accepted him for who he was, and when I accepted him for where he was in life, that's when I was able to accept myself, because I saw me in him and I didn't want to repeat the same patterns. I knew this was an opportunity to fully bring this full circle and to realize that he had always loved me, that he wanted to prioritize me, that he wanted to spend time with me, but he just couldn't, because he couldn't do that with himself. When I realized that it wasn't about me, that's when I stopped taking it personal. When I stopped taking it personal, I started to accept the situation and the experiences as they were. And when I was able to finally reprogram this whole nagging limitation that I wasn't enough, I was able to finally reconnect back to myself. I was able to finally create a reality from the perspective of what I felt that I wanted to do rather than what I felt the world expected me to do. I was able to build a lifestyle based on what I felt fulfilled me rather than what I thought would validate me in the world. And I was so used to spending my time being impressive rather than impactful. And I was so used to spending my time looking for validation rather than fulfillment that I completely missed the first half of my life. So you might be in a position where you feel like you're not enough. You might be in a position where you feel like you're not enough in your relationships, where you have to continuously show more love, where you're constantly looking for more affection, where you're constantly asking, am I pretty enough? Am I good enough? Do I provide more value? You might be in a situation where you don't feel good enough at work, where you're continuously going above and beyond, but you're still not getting the recognition. Or this might be a relationship that you have with your parents, where you feel like you're not enough. You start to realize that in all these situations, it was never about you. It was about them. And when you stop taking on their burdens and when you stop taking on their projections and they stop becoming your experience, you can actually operate from a place that I've always been enough. I'm doing enough and I'm worthy of the love. I'm worthy of respect and I'm worthy of living the life that I want to create. I don't have to do more than this. I don't have to succeed more than I've succeeded. A lot of times when people feel like they're not enough, they're trying to meet an expectation of someone else. They're trying to become this imaginary hero or someone else rather than who they are today. My challenge to you, that's ever how you felt in a relationship or at a job with your parents or with any situation in your life, is to stop creating a narrative of who you need to be and accept who you are in this moment. Who you are in this moment is enough. Who you are in this moment has always been enough. Accept that person, meet yourself where you are. And then from there, see what you can create from that person rather than the person who's always lacking. And when I created my business and when I really started examining my limiting beliefs and how they had been impacting me, I knew this was an opportunity to not only change the narrative, but also to create the life that I wanted on my own terms. And that's what we're going to talk about in the next episode. What life was after. This is an episode that I really want you to listen to coming up, because I'm going to show you exactly what life looks like on the other side of dealing with your limiting beliefs. And that's what I'm going to share with you in Wealthy Minded. How to reframe success past income. What happens beyond financial success? What happens when you've reprogrammed I am enough, but you still face challenges and you're still facing limitations? What do you do then? What's next? I'm going to share with you my journey up into this day. Make sure to subscribe, like, and follow. I'll see you then.